Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today. Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the civic-minded, community-minded, community-spirited volunteering. Now, this was where people would volunteer to do something good and worthwhile to assist the community or a section of the community. It could be assisting senior citizens, it could be assisting children, it could be a whole range of things. Maybe you're helping community level sports where people would give their time to be coaches for the under sevens football team or something or other, tennis team, and where other people would act as in various sport functions, bringing the water and the sliced oranges for half time at the kiddies football match. All sorts of levels of volunteering, and you could see this a lot in sort of local community sports, but other things. I remember a place that I lived as a kid where there was no local council dog pound, and there was a lady that took in stray dogs and looked after them and fed them. And, to me, that's a community service. And we've been involved in community services ourselves, say, looking after, native animals to Australia, the marsupials and that sort of thing. So we feel strongly about things like that, and preserving areas of forest and so on. Now, far from being a greenie or an activist in that sense, but we are involved in those areas. And if I had to pin myself down politically, I find there are a few policies of the Green movement that I would support. There are some policies of the left-wing parties I would subscribe to, and some policies of the right wing. And so I tend to see things on a merit of policy basis rather than political affiliation. On balance, there are more policies from the centre-right I would support than from the other groups, but nonetheless, on a policy basis, my loyalties would be spread widely across the political spectrum, again, based on the merits of each policy rather than the ideology of the party or something like that. But coming back to the volunteering, now volunteering was at a time a selfless act. People weren't getting paid, and maybe didn't get a whole lot of recognition. Some people got recognition. The local mayor might cite Billy Bob Smith because of all the good work he did in this or that area, and it would get mentioned in the local newspaper. So there'd be, I suppose, a degree of kudos and prestige from that. But the idea of volunteering is that you give your time without expecting anything in return, because it improves the situation or the lives or the circumstances of others in your community. And I think that's a good thing. I should be encouraged. Now, we're looking in the modern era where that's being subverted and corrupted by those who have a political agenda, and by the NGOs and the globalists. And volunteer organisations have been transformed into activist NGOs by these things. Now, if I was looking to subvert a country, or you or anyone else was looking to subvert a particular community or a country or a society, you would look at, well, how can I get to them? And you'd look at organisations or groups on the ground, and volunteer groups would be an obvious candidate. Well, let's get into them. We'll infiltrate them and subvert them. And with our people, with our ideology, let's radicalize, and then we can start changing society from within without them even knowing that we're doing it. People have a lot of respect and faith and trust in these organisations. We can use that trust to deceive the people and to duplicitously introduce new sets of values. And as the people trust those institutions and so on, we can actually affect some quite radical change before the people even realise what's happening. So, extremely cynical. And the same can be said for the think tanks and the education system, the schools, and ultimately, of course, the body politic and the media and so on. So these volunteer groups have been subverted and corrupted from being volunteer groups into being political action groups, or all controlled and funded and directed in some way by the globalists to subvert the existing social order and to introduce, if you don't agree with mass migration, you're a Nazi, this sort of thing. And they've certainly been successful in that. And they've had a lot of help, the public servants and the body politic, the government, our supposed elected representatives have known this is going on and just not opposed it, and indeed aided and abetted it, have been given these activist NGOs that give them tax-free charity status so they can get donations and don't have to pay tax and so on. Even though the charter is for these NGO groups that they can't be politically active, they're brazenly politically active, but they never get stopped, and no one opposes them, so they can continue their subversion of the Western states unopposed, pretty much. And you see this in things like again, this thing about rescuing native animals that have been injured. It could be an injury on the road, or maybe they've been mauled by a cat or something. It could be anything. They've fallen out of a tree in a high wind, and we sort of got involved in that. What we found was that increasingly the sort of people that were turning up were some genuine people, but increasingly the turnout of people were lesbians and particularly lesbians, but these were very politically active people who believed that the entire social structure of the West is evil, fascist, Nazi, white supremacist, patriarchy, misogyny. These are the sort of people that were coming in, and they were quite strident in holding these views. So really, that they were there as a political action group, trying to push their radical views. Now, the same could be said for sports and so on. The amount of people that were appearing, supposedly volunteers, that were politically active, saying, well, girls should be equal to the amount of boys that are playing sports, soccer or something like that, or there should be an equal number of girls doing martial arts and this. So there's a lot of activist people appearing. So as soon as NGO money and government money in particular started appearing, then the activists arrived at almost the same time. So I refuse to believe that it could be just a mere coincidence. It's not. There was an intention to infiltrate and subvert these groups and to push out the genuine people who are there to help. And if anyone can't be converted or subverted into the new political thinking, then the idea was to get rid of them and bring in the radicals. And children in primary school are encouraged to not volunteer to help the community, but to volunteer for climate action groups and placard waving, that a revolution is needed because of all those damn fascist, straight, white, male, Nazi, misogynist, patriarchy, because of that. So we have to wave placards around and become activists to bring about this revolution to stop all the. Now, in reality, they want to turn these kids into kids that won't oppose mass migration, that won't oppose the suspension of the rule of law, that won't oppose the eradication of due legal process, that won't oppose the politicization of the judiciary, that won't oppose in any way the globalist project. And that's really what they're about, and pretending it's so I think volunteering has changed. It's not volunteering for the community. It's being conscripted in effect into activist groups to support the globalist project and again to subvert the local society or subvert any part of it that may oppose or disagree with or question the globalist project. So that's the purpose of this. But I think they've taken people away, quite genuinely taken people away from doing proper volunteer work. And if you want to volunteer for quite a few things now, you have to go through quite a substantial government registration process to volunteer. You're not getting paid to do this. And I've noticed the number of people that are involved in what hitherto were volunteer areas of volunteering could be handing out meals to homeless people, for example. That could be one. And there are in winter time, there are a lot of homeless people that are not eating, and they can go to these charities and get food. They used to be volunteers, but now there's more and more paid people, either paid by NGOs or paid by, and they're there to issue stride and fuse. Now, it could have been sort of a Christian charity that would give people, teach them to read the Bible in return for free food. Now it's different. We'll give you free food provided you recite a passage about the evil patriarchy and how everyone's a racist, and so they're indoctrination camps using indoctrinated people to deliver these sort of services, again under the auspices of either the government, as in a declared tax-free charity, or being funded and infiltrated by NGOs. So the very nature of community volunteering, community spirit, is changing, and it's also changed for another respect, because if you look at the volunteers relative to population, I'm thinking of one thing where 95% of the population, or 95% of the volunteers are white people, straight white people, for example. Now, this is one that hasn't been yet fully infiltrated by the NGOs and the government. But where in others that have been infiltrated, you get a much higher proportion of brown and black people and lesbians and so on, that again have appeared because it's their mission to change the mindset of this volunteer group from being a genuine group to help the community into being a political action group. And we're seeing this all over the place now, and it's non-stop, but where it's still a genuine volunteer community group, they're nearly all white. In fact, some are just 100% white. It's only when you get into the political action group that you see this difference of half of them can be, in fact more than half can be black, brown and lesbian, and part of some radical activist group. I also went to a supposed think tank seminar that was held downtown, and the amount of radical activist propagandists running around there. Now, they were being brought from all over the world. Somebody was paying for their plane fares, paying for that. And, they're not staying in the local trailer park or something like that. They're staying in 4- and 5-star hotels downtown. So someone's paying for the plane fares, paying for the hotel, paying for the food, all that sort of thing. That's quite expensive given the amount of them who are being moved around. Now, that's all funded by NGOs. And if you actually drill down into it, I looked at one case where there was a number of Australian government public service departments that were receiving grants from NGOs and were then, if you like, laundering that money back into inviting these people into Australia to give these talks. So because they weren't being invited by NGOs, they didn't get the same vetting process. But the NGO was giving, for example, $50,000 to this government instrumentality, like a Quango. The Quango was then inviting the activist speaker to come in. So it's a very organised way of coming in under the radar. But these people are radical activists telling the most outrageous lies and spreading the most outrageous untruths, pretending to be from the front line. I've been from the front line. I've been out there in the middle of it, and they're all misogynist, fascist Nazis. They're all Hitler. And I've been fighting back against them. I've come here to tell you of my fight against Hitler. But these are all lies. They're all radical propaganda. But preaching, more or less to the converted, but the amount of money that's available for this activism and this penetration into subverting the volunteer community that once was a volunteer community, there's masses of money, just awash with money to subvert this entire thing. You've been with Taskless today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.